Hi everybody, it's Professor Levi Allen, and today I'm going to talk to you about a painting style you might not be as familiar with. It's called genre painting. So genre painting is a type of painting in art history in general that describes not like a theme, kind of like music where you think of, oh, what genre are you listening to? But it's a distinct movement in painting. So if you hear that somebody is talking about 18th century genre painting artists, you should know that that means they're painting domestic interiors. They're not looking at the Rococo with that light and fluffy fantasy world where it's fashion and frivolity, lots of the pastels. They're looking for what is the real in those domestic interiors. But it's not going to be heroic like you're going to see with the neoclassical period or hearkening back to the classical period, which comes all around the same time. So you have these three periods that kind of juxtapose each other. So the artist I want to explore with you for this period is Anne Vallayer-Coster, and I'm really intrigued for you to learn more. So Anne Vallayer-Coster, this is her portrait here, and you notice she's holding a palette, so she's indicating she's an artist. Again, she was born into an artistic family. Her father was a goldsmith, and they worked in the family tapestry factory. Her mother was a portrait artist, especially painting miniature portraits. She trained under her father, and interestingly, she was admitted to the Royal Academy at the age of 26, which doesn't sound very young, but it really was for the time. She is one of only 14 female artists to be admitted to the French Academy in its history before the French Revolution. So it's a really impressive accomplishment of hers. And her first showing, Diderot, who was a philosophe at the time, he said, if all new members of the Royal Academy made a showing like Mademoiselle Vallayer and sustained that high level of quality, the salon would look very different. So it's a huge compliment to her work and her work ethic. She specializes in still lifes, specifically florals, musical instruments, and domestic objects. So she's really looking at those intimate moments that genre painting. She will do some portraits, but what she liked best were those still lifes. So even though a patron might come to her and say, I would like this, she was known as a great diplomat and negotiator, saying, no, I think this is what you really want instead, and would kind of lead her patrons to what she was best able to create for them. She thrived during a time when history painting was becoming really more embraced and the most important. So she's focusing on the smaller, more intimate details. Part of this is because women were seen as unable to look at nude figures, to learn to sketch them properly, so they weren't encouraged to do these grand scale history paintings, and still lifes were seen to be as like the lowest level, amateurish almost, but she really brought the level of still life painting up. And that is a huge deal for looking at her admittance into the Royal Academy. She put it on the same level as these very grand scale history paintings you're going to look at. She had court patronage. Marie Antoinette was a huge supporter of her. When she marries a lawyer named Jean-Pierre Coster. The queen actually comes to her wedding. So it took place at the Palace of Versailles. The queen signs her marriage contracts. This is a huge deal. She's really in this royal patronage. Even during the Reign of Terror, despite her super close connection to the royal family, she is not completely ostracized. Her work does fall into disfavor, but Josephine, the Empress, she buys one of her works. So she is given kind of this chance to stay and explore her work at this time. In 1817, she has a culminating exhibit of all her work at the time. And after that, she's done exhibiting. She dies at the age of 72, but she exhibited over or created over 120 still life works during that period of artistic creation. So let's look at one of her works in detail. So the first work we're going to explore together is a bouquet of flowers in a terracotta vase with peaches and grapes. I know it's a super creative title, but this really does show you some of her amazing still life work. You can also visit this piece in the Dallas Museum of Art if you happen to be able to get to Dallas, so that's really cool that you can see it in life. So when you think of still lifes in general, something to keep in mind is that all of the elements in them convey a story. Think of memes that you think about today, or advertisements that you see in magazines. They are clues to what the artist is trying to talk about. So when you see this image, it's got really lush, beautiful flowers. It has hydrangeas, is also why I included because they're my favorite. It has these soft, ripe peaches and these verdant grapes. So that is really meant to be like, this is an elevated still life. It's not super dark and scary. It's meant to show you that kind of luxurious element. But it's also very transient beauty, right? How long do peaches stay ripe? How long till grapes turn into raisins? Cut flowers are going to die, right? So it's being read this way. So let's kind of look at each element a little bit more. So peaches represent this kind of fleeting beauty. You can see the texture of the fuzz on the skin when you go and look at this painting. They're very soft-skinned fruit. They ripen really quickly. They are linked to sensuality or this transient sense of beauty. In earlier still lifes, you often would see peaches linked specifically with flowers represents fertility and marriage. So an 18th century viewer would see this and read it as, oh, this is graceful, it's about pleasure, but it's also about the passing of time. Grapes to that same 18th century viewer would have read as luxury. They're abundant. You're going to see them mostly in court imagery. There's a relation to Dionysus or Bacchus. So it's the wine, and they're celebratory. They're seen as these artistic creativity when you look at that. In Christian iconography, you can also sometimes see grapes linked to sacrifice, but in this really domestic context, it's going to be more about wealth and enjoyment. Flowers are the epitome of ephemeral beauty. So they are quick. They remind the viewer most desperately of that fleeting nature of youth. It's a vanitas idea. So it's this, how do we die? What vanity are we taking with us? It's also feminine identity. It could be looking at domestic spaces or very gendered spaces that Vallayer-Coster likes to specialize in. So when you look into a still life, I want you to absorb all of these little details that you can kind of figure out the hidden clues that she's putting in. So let's look at our next piece. So I want to end our look at Vallayer-Coster's work by looking at this piece called The Vase of Flowers with a Conch Shell. Again, super creative name. But remember Diderot said of the previous work that she brought still lifes to such a high level. And if everything was painted at that level, that the salon would itself raise up the standards. So interestingly, he says of this work in 1781, so this is about when this one was exhibited, that this type of small paintings lack skill in drawing, and the brush of the strokes in this are terrible. So he's gone on this full shift because the grand history paintings are making a change. But interestingly, Vallayer-Coster combines two really important elements in this. She's starting to figure the Impressionists with her use of the brushstrokes in the shell. They're really light, but her precision in the flowers is still very much what you see in the genre paintings. So let's look at these works in a little bit more detail. So when you look at these peonies over here, notice the detail in the leaves and in the petals. There's shading, there's line work. This is one of her drawings, so it's a preliminary sketch for what she creates, but you can see she really knows how to create the flowers, and the flowers will show this in all of her still lifes. So when you look at the flowers over here, you're going to see that they have those details, but I want you to look at that conch shell a little bit more. Notice that it's still kind of muddy. You can't see super intently like what the gradients are. It's a little bit more pastel, and that's where she's prefiguring the Impressionist. So she's that transitional period between genre painting perhaps and Impressionism. She's really carrying this through. I hope this provides you some insight into her and her style. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit of extra credit for a final approach to this still life and genre world. So what I want you to do for these genre extra credit is consider taking a shot at your own still life. Arrange a few everyday objects that reflect something about your life, and you can photograph them, you can sketch them, you can use ChatGPT to create this one. This is a great project for this because it's extra credit. So for me, I included art elements. I love blue. I looked at some favorite paintings I have. I have a Jamaican flag because my family is Jamaican. I have a poppy. One of my daughters is named Poppy. An elephant for good luck. So all of those are part of my still life in telling the story. So just like Vallayer-Coster did, I want you to get a chance to do that. You're going to post this on the discussion board that is related to this project and describe what elements are in this and follow the instructions on that discussion board. So as we end this look at genre painting, I want you to think again about how Vallayer-Coster's work reminds us that beauty can be found in these smallest details. So it's that skilled workmanship and vision, and how these quiet moments and those domestic scenes, those genre elements, became these high standards of art.